The air in the common room of the Aegis training facility tasted of pine-scented cleaner and gun oil, a sterile Christmas cocktail. Fluorescent lights hummed a flat, insectal tune, stripping all warmth from the sad tinsel draped over a tactical gear display. It was a place of hard angles and cold, polished concrete, a world painted in shades of gray and olive drab. In this world, the old man was a splash of impossible color. He sat alone in a corner, cradling a thick ceramic mug. The suit he wore was a deep, soft red, the velvet nap worn smooth in patches over the knees and elbows. Its white fur trim was no longer pristine, but had yellowed with age, like the pages of a forgotten book. He was a relic, a piece of misplaced folklore in a cathedral of modern warfare. His face was a roadmap of wrinkles, a testament to 1,000 sunrises and just as many long, dark nights. A beard, white as fresh-fallen snow, cascaded over his chest. But it was his hands that defied the rest of him. While his body seemed frail, settled deep into the worn vinyl of the chair, his hands were unnaturally still. They held the mug of hot cocoa with a steadiness that bordered on inhuman, a surgeon's calm, a sniper's repose. He did not move. He was a statue carved from patience. Then the doors burst open, not with force, but with an invisible wave of pure, uncut ego. Lieutenant Jax and his team, Viper Squad, strode in. They were young, sculpted from granite and arrogance, their movements sharp and loud. They were fresh from the kill house, their faces still smeared with cam paint, smelling of sweat, cordite, and victory. Jax was the apex predator of this concrete jungle. His jaw was sharp, his eyes a pale, cold blue, and he wore his uniform like a second skin tailored by the gods of war themselves. He surveyed the room, his gaze a sweeping search for anything out of place, anything that didn't meet his standard of lethal perfection. His eyes landed on the old man in the corner. A smirk sliced across his face. It was a cruel thing, full of sharp edges. He stopped, letting his team fan out behind him, a pack of young wolves waiting for their alpha to signal the hunt. Well, Jax boomed, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Look what the cat dragged in. Heads turned. The low murmur of conversation in the room faltered, then died completely. The only sound was the hum of the lights. Someone call a nursing home? Jax continued, projecting for the entire room. Or is Grandpa here for the kiddie party? A few of his vipers snickered. The old man did not look up. He raised the mug to his lips, the movement slow, deliberate, and utterly unshaken. He took a sip of his cocoa, his gaze fixed on some middle distance only he could see. The silence stretched. It was a thick, uncomfortable thing, and Jax was not a man who tolerated discomfort. The old man's indifference was a gauntlet thrown at his feet. It was a rejection of his power, his presence, his very existence in this space he commanded. Jax's neck flushed a dull red. He stalked across the floor, his combat boots thudding with aggressive finality. He stopped directly in front of the old man's chair, casting a long shadow over him. Hey, old man. Jax's voice was lower now, a menacing growl. I'm talking to you. Still nothing. The old man's calm was a wall of solid ice. Jax's anger was a blowtorch, and the ice was not melting. This is a restricted facility, Jax spat. What's your clearance? From behind the quartermaster's counter, Master Sergeant Elias Thorne watched. Elias had been a fixture in this place for 40 years. He'd seen cocky lieutenants come and go like seasons. He'd seen legends walk these halls, their greatness hidden behind quiet eyes and humble shoulders. He knew the suit. He knew the man. A cold knot of dread tightened in his stomach. He felt like a man watching a child wander into a lion's cage with a pointed stick. Except he wasn't sure who was the child and who was the lion. Jax leaned down, invading the old man's space. The smell of his sweat and self-satisfaction was a foul miasma. Let's see your credentials, Pops. Or did you just wander in off the street, looking for a free meal? The lieutenant reached out, about to jab a finger into the old man's shoulder. For the first time, the old man moved. It wasn't much. He simply shifted his gaze, lifting his eyes to meet Jax's. They were a deep, startling blue, like the heart of a glacier. They held no fear, no anger, no emotion at all. They were wells of pure, unadulterated calm. In their depths, Jax saw a flicker of something he couldn't name. An ancient stillness, a profound weariness that was not the same as weakness. It unnerved him. For a split second, his bravado wavered. Then his pride kicked back in harder than before. He would not be stared down by this geriatric fossil. "What, you deaf?" he snarled. "ID now." The old man's eyes drifted down to a small, tarnished pin fastened to the lapel of his red suit. It was a tiny, intricately detailed sleigh, pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. It was the kind of cheap trinket you might find in a Christmas cracker. Jax's eyes followed his gaze. He let out a short, barking laugh. "Is that what you're so proud of?" he sneered, pointing at the pin. "What's that supposed to be? Your special little club? Your call sign? Let me guess. Rudolph?" His team erupted in laughter, the sound sharp and cruel. The word hung in the air. Call sign. The old man's focus shifted inward. The sterile common room dissolved. The smell of pine cleaner was replaced by the scent of jet fuel and freezing air. He is falling. The wind screams past his ears, a banshee's wail. Below him, the city is a tapestry of festive lights, a cruel mockery of the warmth and safety he is leaving behind. The red suit is not for cheer. It is camouflage against the gaudy holiday decorations of an enemy capital. It is a ghost disguise. The radio in his ear crackles. The voice is young, terrified. They have him on the 5th floor. No way in or out. The building is locked down tight. He doesn't respond. He saves his breath for the cold. His hands, steady as they are now, check the release on the heavy canvas bag strapped to his chest. Not a bag of toys. A bag of tools. A bag of miracles. Another voice, the pilot, calm under pressure. Altitude 5,000 and dropping. "Kringle, you are on your own. Godspeed." He looks down at the target, a grand embassy building, its roofline a dark gash against the snow-lit sky. He sees the target chimney, a black square of promise. An entrance no one ever guards. A voice in his memory, his commander from decades ago, briefing him on the first run. They'll be watching the doors, the windows, the sewers. They will never, ever watch the chimney. Nobody is crazy enough to be Santa Claus. He had just smiled. The memory faded, leaving a faint echo of roaring wind and biting cold. He was back in the common room. Jax was still talking, his voice a dull drone. But something had changed. The old man's stillness was no longer passive. It had become watchful, predatory. Elias saw it. He saw the shift in the old man's shoulders, the microscopic tightening of the muscles around his ancient eyes. He had seen that look before on the faces of men about to do terrible, necessary things. That was enough. Elias slipped quietly from behind his counter and disappeared into his small, cluttered office. He shut the door, the click of the latch unnaturally loud in the tense room. He picked up the secure line, his fingers punching in a number he had learned by heart, but had prayed he would never have to use. The phone was answered on the first ring. A crisp, formal voice. "Shepard." "General." Elias breathed, his voice tight. "It's Thorne, at Aegis." "Elias? What is it? Is a facility compromised?" "In a manner of speaking, sir," Elias said, his eyes darting to the small window in his door. He could see Jax gesturing wildly, his face contorted with rage. "It's happening again. Someone's poking the bear." There was a pause on the line. A heavy, pregnant silence. "Are you sure?" General Shepard's voice was suddenly cold steel. "Yes, sir," Elias whispered. "A young lieutenant. Full of himself. He's about to put his hands on him." "The bear," Shepard said, his voice a low rumble of impending thunder. "You mean that bear, don't you, Elias?" "The one and only, sir. He's wearing the suit." "I'm on my way," Shepard said. The line went dead. There was no goodbye, there was no time. Back in the common room, Jax had reached his limit. This old fool's silence was a personal insult, a public humiliation. He had to reassert his dominance. He had to break him. "That's it. Jax announced to the room. "I've had enough of this. You're a security risk." He reached out and grabbed the old man's arm, his fingers digging into the worn velvet. "Get up," he snarled, yanking. "I'm taking you to the brig. We're going to find out exactly who you are, you pathetic old." He never finished the sentence. Boom! The main doors of the common room didn't open. They exploded inward, slamming against the interior walls with the force of a battering ram. The sound was a physical blow, a shockwave that rattled the teeth of everyone present. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the harsh outdoor light, was a figure of pure, undiluted authority. General Marcus Shepard, for stars glittered on his collar, hard and cold as distant suns. He was flanked by 2 command sergeants, giants in dress blues whose faces were carved from granite and displeasure. Shepard was not a large man, but his presence filled the room, consumed it, sucked all the air and noise into a black hole of command. The silence that followed the crash was absolute. It was a deafening, terrified void. Jax froze. His hand was still clamped on the old man's arm. His mouth hung open. All the blood drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, sickly white. He recognized the 4 stars. He felt his career, his future, his entire world collapsing into a single, horrifying point. General Shepard's eyes scanned the room, missing nothing. They were the eyes of a hawk, and they saw every detail of the tableau before him. The silent, watching crowd, the sneering, now terrified vipers, the arrogant young lieutenant with his hand on the old man in the red suit. His gaze was a physical weight, crushing Jax where he stood. But he did not speak to Jax. He ignored him completely. With a precision of movement that was terrifying to behold, General Shepard marched across the polished concrete floor. His boots clicked with the metronomic certainty of an executioner's countdown. He did not stop until he was directly in front of the old man. He came to a ramrod straight halt. He clicked his heels together. The sound was like a rifle shot in the dead silence. Then he raised his hand in the sharpest, most profound salute Jax had ever seen in his life. It was a gesture of such deep, unwavering respect that it bordered on reverence. It was a salute a king gives an emperor. "Mr. Kringle," General Shepard's voice boomed, clear and strong, resonating with an emotion that sounded suspiciously like awe. "It is an honor, sir. Forgive the intrusion." The old man, Mr. Kringle, slowly turned his head and looked up at the 4-star general. He gave a slow, tired nod. "Marcus," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "You've gotten old." A ghost of a smile touched Shepard's lips. "It happens to the best of us, sir, though it seems to have skipped you." Shepard held his salute, his arm rigid, his eyes locked on the old man. He was waiting for permission to stand down. After a long moment, Kringle gently raised a hand and waved it dismissively. "At ease, son. You're making a scene." Shepard dropped his salute, but remained at a perfect position of attention. Only then did he allow his gaze to drift, to fall upon Lieutenant Jax. The full, terrible weight of his fury descended. His voice, when he spoke, was no longer booming. It was a whisper, a blade of frozen steel that cut through the silence and flayed the skin from Jax's pride. "Lieutenant." Jax flinched as if struck. He snatched his hand back from Kringle's arm as if it were on fire. "General, sir," he stammered. "Do you have any idea who this is?" Shepard asked, his voice deceptively soft. "Sir, he had no identification. He was a security." "I did not ask for your excuse, Lieutenant," Shepard hissed, his voice dropping another octave. "I asked you a question. Do you know who this man is?" "No, sir." Jax whispered, his throat tight. Shepard took a step closer, and Jax involuntarily took a step back. "Of course you don't," the general said, his voice dripping with contempt. "They don't teach history anymore. They only teach arrogance." He turned his head slightly, addressing the entire silent, captivated room. "For those of you who were born after the wall came down," Shepard began, his voice rising again, taking on the cadence of a lecturer, a historian, a storyteller. "For those of you whose knowledge of the Cold War comes from video games, allow me to educate you." He gestured with a crisp, gloved hand toward the old man. "You're looking at the man they called St. Nick, the man they called Kringle. He is not a mascot. He is a monument." A ripple of confusion and awe went through the crowd. During the darkest days of the Cold War, Shepard continued, his voice resonating with history, we had a problem. We had men and women behind the Iron Curtain, deep in enemy territory. Spies, assets, pilots who'd been shot down. Sometimes they got caught, trapped, held in an embassy, a black site, a fortified building with no way out. Exfiltration was impossible. We wrote them off. We called them ghosts. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. But one man refused to accept that. This man, he devised a new method of infiltration, an impossible one. He called it Operation Chimney Sweep. Shepard's eyes found the small, tarnished sleigh pin on Kringle's suit. "That is not a trinket, Lieutenant. That is the unit crest for the most exclusive, most dangerous, most insane special operations unit in the history of the United States military. A unit with a population of 1 inch." Jax's face was a mask of disbelief and horror. "When one of our ghosts was trapped, we sent him," Shepard said, his voice filled with a fierce pride. "He would go in from a high-altitude, low-opening jump, in the dead of a winter night. He wore this suit not as a joke, but as urban camouflage. Against the holiday lights of Moscow, East Berlin, Beijing, he became invisible. A fleeting glimpse of red that the mind would dismiss as a Christmas decoration, a trick of the light. He didn't drop down a chimney with a bag of toys. He dropped onto a hostile roof with a bag of specialized gear and a one-way ticket for our people. He went in through the one place they never, ever thought to guard. He was the ghost who hunted other ghosts. The room was so quiet, the collective held breath was a tangible thing. Shepard finally turned the full, unshielded force of his wrath upon Jax. His face was a thundercloud. "Lieutenant, you put your hands on a living legend. You, a boy who has never seen a real shadow, just the pre-packaged, safety-inspected ones in this training complex. You, who have never felt the cold that can freeze a man's soul, chose to humiliate a man who has spent more time behind enemy lines than you have spent in uniform." He stepped forward until he was inches from Jax's face. "This man has personally rescued 37 American assets from certain death. He has 3 Distinguished Service Crosses, a box full of silver stars, and a Medal of Honor that he refuses to wear because, in his words, he was just doing his job. He is the reason this facility has a Kringle protocol for unconventional vertical entry. He wrote the book you are not worthy of reading." Jax was trembling. His entire body shook with a mixture of fear and shame so profound it was almost a physical illness. "You and your entire Viper team." Shepard's voice was now a low, lethal hum, the sound of a high-voltage wire. "Are on report. Your special selection candidacies are hereby revoked. Permanently." The other Vipers, who had been trying to shrink into the walls, visibly flinched. "Effective immediately," Shepard continued. "You are all reassigned to Thule Air Base, Greenland." A collective gasp went through the room. Thule was the end of the line, a frozen purgatory for the disgraced and the useless. "You will spend the next 2 years of your careers supervising the scraping of ice off the ballistic missile early warning system radar domes. You will see nothing but ice and darkness. You will feel nothing but cold. And you will think about what it means to respect your elders. You will learn humility. You will learn it in the dark, and you will learn it in the cold." He leaned in, his whisper for Jax alone. "And you will thank God every single day that Mr. Kringle is a more forgiving man than I am. Because if it were up to me, you would be scraping ice with your teeth. Is that understood?" "Yes, General." Jax choked out, the words barely audible. His face was a ruin, his arrogance shattered into a million pieces. "Get out," Shepard commanded, his voice returning to a parade ground roar. "Get out of my sight. Get out of this room. And get out of my army." Jax didn't need to be told twice. He turned and fled, his Vipers scrambling after him like beaten dogs. They didn't walk. They ran, their shame a visible aura around them. The room was silent once more, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer tense. It was reverent. General Shepard took a deep, steadying breath, the fury draining from his face, replaced by a weary concern. He turned back to the old man. Kringle had watched the entire exchange with his unnerving calm. He finally looked up at Shepard, and a flicker of something, pity perhaps, danced in his ancient eyes. He spoke, his voice the soft rumble of distant thunder. "He's just a boy, Marcus." Shepard's jaw tightened. "He's a lieutenant in the United States Army, sir. He is supposed to be a man. He's full of fire," Kringle continued, as if the general hadn't spoken. "Like we were once. Don't snuff it out. Just aim it better." The simple wisdom of the statement hung in the air. Shepard looked at the man he idolized, this quiet hero in a ridiculous red suit, and felt a familiar wave of awe. He had just verbally dismantled a man's career, and Kringle was already thinking of rebuilding it. "As you wish, sir," Shepard said, his voice softening. "I'll reconsider the duration, but the lesson must be learned." "It will be," Kringle said with certainty. "The cold is a good teacher." He pushed himself up from the chair, a slight groan escaping his lips. For the first time, he looked his age. He was just an old man in a worn suit, his joints stiff from sitting too long. "Let me get you an escort, sir," Shepard offered immediately. "My men can take you wherever you need to go." Kringle shook his head. "No, thank you, Marcus. I can manage. The sleigh is just outside." He gave a slight, mischievous wink. He picked up his now-cold mug of cocoa and placed it gently on the table. He nodded once to Shepard. Then he turned and began to walk toward the exit. As he moved, a remarkable thing happened. The crowd of soldiers, operators, and staff, these hard, cynical men and women, parted for him. They didn't step aside. They created a corridor, an aisle of respect, their bodies forming a silent honor guard. No one spoke. No one moved. They just watched as the quiet legend in the faded red suit shuffled past, his footsteps soft on the concrete floor. He reached the door, pushed it open, and disappeared into the winter afternoon, leaving behind a silence that was louder and more profound than any explosion. In the epilogue of that day, things changed. Lieutenant Jax did go to Thule. He spent 2 years in the soul-crushing cold, not just scraping ice, but reading. He read history. He read biographies of the quiet men who had won wars in the shadows. He came back a different man, quieter, calmer, wiser. He never became a viper, but he became a good officer, the kind who listened more than he spoke. A new mandatory module was added to the curriculum at Aegis and all Special Forces training centers. It was called the Kringle Doctrine. It was not just about unconventional entry tactics. Its first and most important chapter was on humility, on the danger of judging a book by its cover, on the simple, vital truth that the most dangerous man in the room is often the one you don't notice. And far away, in a small, snow-dusted cabin in a forest no one could find on a map, an old man named Nicholas sat by a crackling fire. The legendary red suit hung in a cedar-lined closet, clean and pressed, waiting for a call that would never come again. His hands, still perfectly steady, were busy. He was carving a small, wooden reindeer, his movements precise, patient, and full of a quiet grace. For some, the greatest battles are fought in the noise and the fury, under the roar of engines and the crack of gunfire. For others, the greatest victory is the silence that follows, a peace earned in the cold and the dark, a quiet so profound the whole world has to stop and listen.